These 2 years in ancient India literally changed the world forever. But we genuinely don't know what happened. Let me explain. By changed the world, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, the years of 323 to 321 BC are the catalyst for the largest and only unified and archaeologically attested ancient Indian empire. We're talking Bay of Bengal to Afghanistan. An empire that forced Alexander the Great's general into a treaty. The empire that gave Buddhism to the world. We genuinely don't know a thing about the founder, Chandragupta Maurya. But let me be specific about what I mean by that. I'm saying there's 0 contemporary Indian inscriptions during his reign, 0 letters, 0 journals, 0 battle maps, 0 named generals, 0 tactical details of any specific engagement that he fought, 0 eyewitness accounts of his rise to power, and yet in India he's known as an obscure youth who rose to emperor of the subcontinent. We see the input, we see the output, but the process itself is a complete black box. We're actually using fragments of fragments to even piece together his story. But look, let's try to actually reconstruct it. And I'm going to be a little bit more strict than even my own people might appreciate. Even though I know ancient India was mostly based on oral tradition, in order to get any degree of academic seriousness, we're constructing the story specifically based on contemporary documents, hard epigraphy, carbon-dated archaeology, and any independent foreign account needs to be cross-referenced. Now, with this degree of strictness applied, here's first what gets taken out of this man's legendary story. Brace yourself. With this filter, there's no divine omen, he's not sleeping with lions, there's no magical swords, no peacocks, no destined for greatness origin story. That much we can accept. Here's the other thing. Chanakya, the legendary Indian Machiavelli before Machiavelli, the prime minister of Chandragupta Maurya, or advisor, depending on the story, and the writer of the legendary Arthashastra, the cinematic story of the vengeful Brahmin who was removed from the Nanda court, the Nanda Empire being the most powerful empire before Chandragupta Maurya. Look, this was their map. But the idea that a Brahmin mastermind was kicked out of the court and found a young Chandragupta Maurya, and then trained him to overtake the Nanda Empire, it's an ancient and loved tradition in India. But if we're going strictly based on this filter, we can't use it as a contemporary source for Chandragupta Maurya's specific actions. Especially when in modern day, people even question the existence of Chanakya as a person. All of this could change with more contemporary evidence through archaeology, and obviously we acknowledge that foreign sources are definitely not correct about India internally, but if Indian contemporary sources themselves were mostly based through oral transmission, then we're not going to play some goose chase with evidence that may or may not exist. Now here's how the basic Chandragupta Maurya story goes. After Chanakya mentors him when he's a youth, he overthrows Alexander the Great's satraps through some grassroots liberation movement with the people, and then fought a war against the Nandas, which resulted in him establishing his capital in Pataliputra. Now there's no ancient ash layer at Pataliputra, and the idea of a liberation movement, let's just look at what actually happened. You gotta remember, at this time in the world, it was Alexander's world. In around 326 BC, his army is coming through India, and this is where the Roman records start. A youth named Sandrokottos, somewhere in between 15 and 20 years old, is in Punjab whenever Alexander the Great's army is passing. Plutarch, assessing lost diaries of Alexander's soldiers themselves, records the meeting, saying that Sandrokottos observes the Macedonian phalanx, along with the logistics of moving men through terrain, framing it in a way where he's watching and absorbing what Alexander's doing. Now Alexander ends up beating a minor tribal king, Purushottam, and thinks that it's over. Except this was no Battle of Ipsus. This was India. He still had the Nanda Empire to worry about. But Alexander himself wasn't particularly worried, or so his soldiers and officers. Now the Greek sources actually describe the Nandas through terrified reports of Alexander's officers. Now they estimated 200,000 infantry, 20,000 cavalry, and between 3,000 and 4,000 war elephants, something the Macedonians just got introduced to. Now obviously these numbers are probably inflated, but history doesn't lie. The men who defeated the Persian Empire, crossed the Hindu Kush, and fought King Purushottam, the ones who walked through everything, fully staged a mutiny and refused to travel further east. Sources say that they wanted to see their families. Of course this is one of the main points, but look at the timeline. The Nanda army is what stopped Alexander the Great. Nobody wants to fight that many men and elephants beyond the Ganga plain. Then in 323 BC, Alexander dies in Babylon. But remember, his claim to fame was that everywhere he went, he'd leave behind a governor or satrap. Now the Greek and Macedonian ones that he left in the Indus Valley The satraps of Gandhara, the garrison commanders, the military colonies, all cut off from supply, reinforcements, and the chain of command, all of which even gave their presence legitimacy. And guess what? Their individual bosses, Alexander's generals, began fighting each other in the wars of the Diadochi for the next 40 years. And so these guys were stuck in the deep end, which brings me to the 2 years, 323 to 321 BC. We do not know what happened. Now there's claims and reconstructions, but we know from Justin the Roman that Chandragupta gathered mercenary forces. The word in Latin specifically suggests armed bands, possibly bandits, disaffected soldiers. And it said he specifically led a violent insurgency that assassinated the Macedonian prefects and dismantled the foreign garrison in the northwest. Pure cold-blooded coup. Iron-willed opportunism. Not some grassroots liberation movement. We obviously know he didn't face a united Greek army. He mobilized the people, rolled up in isolated, under-resourced garrison posts. His commanders were already looking over their shoulders at each other, and, well, he cleaned up. Then he turned east, towards the Nanda Empire. If we had fragments from the Roman sources about how he overtook the satrapies, this is where the black box is absolute. Chandragupta Maurya's conquest of the Nanda Empire is something I wish we knew about, along with really all of this. But we don't know the specific battles, we don't know the generals' names. Dude, we don't even know the route of his march. We don't know the Nanda Emperor's response. We don't definitively know if there was a siege of Pataliputra, maybe a palace coup, a negotiated surrender. We don't know. There's no archaeological destruction there at Qumran. So we can reasonably guess that the capital was taken intact. Maybe just a decapitation of political leadership while taking the state machine as it is. We don't know. All that we can assume is that he took over the Nanda military-industrial complex. Then there's more silence. Maybe during this time Chandragupta was consolidating the army. Remember, he mobilized the people specifically to kill the Greek foreigners. I'm sure there was a lot of mistrust that he had to weed out through militarization, but we're still assuming here. Remember, Alexander's generals were still fighting with each other. Out of them, this guy's coming out on top. Seleucus Nicator. Now, Seleucus is deciding to march east. He wants to reclaim the territories that Alexander the Great left behind in the Indus. He thinks he's going to just fight some fragmented Indian kingdoms. He's recalling Purushottam, he's ready. Clearly, Purushottam isn't what he got. We can assume Chandragupta Maurya is what he got. But why am I saying assume? Well, once again, we don't know what happened. The Mauryan-Seleucid War is one of the most mysterious campaigns ever. However, it definitely was an epic engagement in the ancient world, because the outcome of the war was recorded in a treaty that was recognized by many in the ancient world. Now, according to Strabo and Appian, Seleucus was forced to cede 4 provinces: Arachosia, modern-day Kandahar in southern Afghanistan; Gedrosia, modern-day Balochistan; Paropamisadae, Kabul in the Hindu Kush region; and Aria, modern Herat in western Afghanistan. In exchange, Chandragupta gave Seleucus 500 war elephants, measly compared to the 9,000 that he had in his reserves. That's estimated, but here's the onion. It said they formed a marriage alliance. We don't know if any Indian women were sent to the Greeks, but the Greeks sent Megasthenes to live in Chandragupta's capital. We can likely assume that Greek women were brought to India. But like I said, we do not know for certain. Guys, do you understand what that means? You don't force a battle-hardened Greek conqueror who fought Antigonus, Demetrius, and every successor general and won to surrender modern-day Afghanistan and Pakistan unless you've outmaneuvered and outmatched him militarily. And those 500 elephants that he gifted Seleucus literally changed the course of human history, those elephants being the reason he won the Battle of Ipsus, beating Antigonus in 301 BC, and settling the Greek succession wars. Chandragupta Maurya's elephants directly led to Seleucid rule and Hanukkah. What hard evidence do we have to back this up? Qumran in modern Patna shows timber palace fortifications dating to the late 4th century BC. We also have Rudraman's inscription, recording the Sudarshan Lake Dam in Gujarat, specifically naming Chandragupta Maurya. The biggest piece of hard evidence we have is the exact timeline of the Mauryan Empire aligning with only one new currency in India, the Karshaparnas with the Mauryan imperial sun, standardizing all the previous kingdoms' currency, all uniform from the northwest to the Deccan, showing the scale of the empire. You can't do that unless you've absolutely destroyed the competition and created a monopoly on violence and spirituality. And yet between 323 and 321 BC in India, something happened so violent, so total, and so efficient, it united the subcontinent, and we have no idea how it was done. I gotta say, he was that guy.